just for Squarespace Circle members. I'm Sam Z, one of your Squarespace Circle community managers. And I'm joined, of course, by co-host and Gen Z language translator, Sarah Graysdorf.
You're too kind, Sam. Hey, everybody. I am another community manager for the Squarespace Circle team. And of course, we're joined in the chat by McKenna Parzik, our Circle Forum MVP. Last month at Circle Live, we talked about design predictions for 2023. Really curious if anyone's starting to see those come to fruition. And this month, we'll be talking about finding new clients.
That's right. Now, if you're like me, an introvert who rehearses small talk before meeting someone new, the thought of networking to find new clients sounds like a nightmare. But finding new clients doesn't have a one-size-fits-all approach. Web design clients can show up anywhere. It's even possible that you could find a new client connection during today's Circle Live. Hey, Sarah, do you want to be my new client?
Absolutely not. No, thank you.
Okay, that hurts. But maybe would you at least give me some feedback on my pitch?
What pitch? There was no pitch. I don't know anything about what services you offer. I don't know how to contact you. Frankly, I don't trust you.
Well, okay, obviously I have some preparation to do before our next client conversation. Fortunately, we have a lot of Circle members watching right now. So I'm curious, folks in the chat, what do you think is the most important thing to bring to a conversation with a potential client? No right answers. Again, no one-size-fits-all approach, and you can answer in the chat, and later we'll do some call-outs. And while you're chatting it up in the screen below, this would not be an internet talk show without a message sponsored by Squarespace. And today, I'm actually very, very pleased that I'll be able to share our, oh no, wait a second. Hey, Sarah, this is not working. Hey, Sarah, can I send you a link and you can share your screen, the video?
Yes, I would love to. That's why you have
Oh
a
my
co-host.
gosh, I'm on a new fancy setup today. You've probably noticed it, and it's for some reason just not working. I'm going to send this to you in the host and panelist, Sarah, and you can just share your screen and hit play as soon as it goes on.
Awesome.
Good to have a co-host.
Yes, dream team. Okay, let me get
Circle
that
Live.
up.
Circle
Okay.
Live is brought to you.
Okay, we're getting there. We're getting there. Share screen, and here we go.
By Squarespace Annual
Oh,
Plan.
let's just start over.
Circle Live is brought to you by Squarespace Annual Plans. Some websites are destined for short, beautiful lives, but for the ones that are meant to endure, make sure you and your clients choose annual. The Circle 20 discount only applies to annual subscriptions, and combined with the usual annual discount, can save your clients up to 44% on their first year. Not only that, annual subscriptions entitle your clients to a free custom domain. And don't forget that only annual subscriptions count as qualifying subscriptions under the referral payment benefit. Here's to a great 2023 Circle.
Here is to a great 2023 and also a great co-host. Thank you for saving me a bit there, Sarah. McKenna, could you actually share a link to the annual plans info in the chat, just so people know all about that? And I'm curious, I want to see where people are joining us from in the chat. We've got Sophia Oja's here, great listening. I know that you're actually gonna be talking to our content team about some potential client stuff. We've got Dave is joining us from London, UK. Confidence and clarity, Kim says, for the best thing to bring to a client meeting, showing value. This is at York. And a calm approach from Jason Dorset, which is something that I think is so important to bring to any conversation, including a live broadcast like we're now in. Well, we have such a great conversation planned for you all. It's not all going to be promos and chats. If you're going to be emailing, calling, LinkedIning, there are so many ways to get out there and find new clients. And our guests today have their client tactics down pat. I'm so excited to bring up our first guest, Krishna Solanki, who has been building up her brand, Krishna Solanki Design, since 2019. Krishna, welcome to Circle Live.
Thank you, Sam. It's a pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for being here. And our second guest today, Elisabeth Young, the course creator and self-described multi-passionate entrepreneur behind so many different websites. Elisabeth, thank you for being here today with us.
Yeah, thanks so much. I'm really excited about this and talking about finding clients. I feel like, that's a lot of people's number one question. So it'll be fun.
Definitely. Speaking of number one question, I'm going to start off with a question myself to you, Elisabeth. And then we're going to toss it over to Krishna. I love the phrase multi-passionate because I know that you came into web design from the wedding industry where you probably already had a list of clients. But I'm curious, who was your first web design client?
Yeah, my very first one for helping somebody, not myself, build out a website. I had built so many sites on Squarespace for myself before doing this, was a letterpress printer. She's based out of Redondo Beach, California, called Swell Press. And she wanted to create an online course. So I recommended using Squarespace to create her website. So we created a site called learnletterpress.co. She still sells the course to this day and has expanded into other offerings like business coaching as well for stationers. And I did her website because she was a connection from the wedding industry and the time that I spent there. So yeah, she was my first one and still probably one of my biggest ones to this day because we continue to work with each other.
Gosh, it's so important to build those long-lasting relationships. Krishna, same question for you. Who was your first web design client?
Absolutely. And you're not wrong there, Elisabeth, because one of my long-lasting clients is actually one of my first clients as well. So if I put it into perspective of who if you think real client, that's going to be this person, this agency that I worked with, and they came about through a referral. But if I think prior to that, I think I was my first client because I kind of started using Squarespace for my own business back then, and learned how to use it and kind of went into the nitty-gritty of like the templates and everything like that, and made some noise, which is where a fellow business owner learned that I was all about Squarespace and recommended my first client across to me. And actually that product was great. We redid her website and twice over since then. So she's been my long-standing client for about 8 years now.
That's awesome. Krishna, you broke up a little bit at the end there, but I think we got the gist of it, that you've got another long-standing client that you've been working with.
Absolutely.
I think we're all in agreement that that's like the ideal thing. And I'm sure there's people who, there's actually a lot of really great stuff being shared in chat right now about clients that people have talked to and, how they've gone about finding them. But before I go on with more of my questions, Sarah, you look like you've got a great question to ask next.
Could you see from here up that I'm on the edge of my seat? So there's a lot of ways to go about finding clients, which Elisabeth and Krishna, I'm sure you both are familiar with. And I think that there's this like narrative that you have to be on social media to be getting your brand out there. I'm curious, do you both think that you need to be on social media to find new clients? And Elisabeth, do you want to start us off?
For sure. I could do a TED talk on this topic, actually. I could probably talk the entire hour about just how much social media has changed. And in my opinion, I think social media is a wonderful tool. I think you need to be using it appropriately in your business and not relying solely on it. I feel like I personally made a bit of an error in my early days in the wedding industry, relying way too much on social media. So that would have been back in like 2015 when I really had started all of that, instead of relying on personal connections and networking at the time. Today, I think it's quite possible to completely run your business without social media at all. It scares people a lot to go that route. I think it's great to have those platforms because people do search for you in those places, but how much you're actively using them is completely up to you. So once again, it's a tool, one tool of many that can be used. I could talk about it all day, but I'll leave it there for now because I know Krishna has thoughts as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I do really agree with you. It is just a tool to kind of help elevate the business and kind of make sure that you're using it to the right potential. So personally, for me, when I started my business, I was just purely using social media and Instagram as a tool to kind of just share what I was doing, give some insight into like what I enjoy doing personally as like a freelance website designer and developer. And then I realized that actually it's working in terms of bringing in those clients. So I found that because it was so natural to me, I used Instagram for a form of behind the scenes almost. And it worked in my favor because I grew a lot of referrals and I almost got inquiries coming through Instagram. But then I realized, should I be kind of focusing on Instagram? Shall I focus on Twitter, Facebook? There are so many out there. And actually, I kind of focused on, and I believe you should only focus on the platforms where you think your audience is. Otherwise, you can kind of almost dilute your attention, which doesn't necessarily work to your favor. So it's a great tool. I do think, in contrary to like what you were saying, Liz, I do find that for me, that because of the nature of my business being so digital, I find that I have to be kind of present. If I'm consistently posting on Instagram and on, for example, I do referrals come through, but that consistency is dependent on how I want to run my business. So I wouldn't say it's every day or it's every hour or anything like that. It's kind of consistent to when I feel comfortable and I want to share, because otherwise I think that you can get really messy really quickly with social. So yeah.
And I'll hop in and say, if it's okay, one more thought. I think context of what you're working on is so important, because in the launch that I'm working on currently, I have 18 other artists who are part of this summit that I'm creating. And the best way for us to bounce off of each other and share with each other is by tagging each other on Instagram. So that's a setting that makes a lot of sense for us getting the word out about our event and getting students to join the summit and to learn from these artists. But when it's just you running your business, you have to evaluate between, like you said, Krishna, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest. I think a lot of people forget about Pinterest because it's not really social media, but Pinterest is a really powerful platform and search engine that I wish I had understood better, especially as someone doing something in the visual arts for weddings for so long. I think I undervalued that and skipped over it. So there's a lot of these platforms we need to evaluate. And I would say like picking one or two to be your bread and butter is a better strategy than spreading yourself too thin between all of them.
Yeah, I think that's such a great point. And something else that I kind of want to like double click.
I totally agree with you on that point.
Awesome. Something I want to just double click into really quickly is something that we talked a little bit in our pre-show call, and that's on like assessing return on investment of various channels. And I know Elisabeth, you mentioned that sometimes with social media, it felt like that's not where you were finding your clients. And so the return on investment just wasn't that high. Can you talk a little bit about how you assess which channels are bringing you clients and how you know which ones to double down on versus maybe like pivot in your direction and in a new direction?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really important for your intake forms. Actually, when you have people inquiring with you, you want to ask where they're finding you. You might end up being really surprised. I did have people who would come through to say, I did find a photo of yours on Pinterest from your website. Somebody else must have put it there. It wasn't me, you know? So I was really surprised by things like that. So if you have these questions in your intake form or you're doing a client call, always make sure that you're asking, where did you find me? How did you hear about me? And I actually got a lot of people from SEO as well because of my word calligraphy in Atlanta that showed up on my website all the time for my wedding stuff. I still get people to this day that email me and reach out about calligraphy. And I have a referral network of people I send those to. I know we're going to talk about referrals in a while here, but that's my go-to is, of course, in that intake form or that first call, asking how they found me.
That's a really good point, because that's one of the things I do on my intake form as well. So when that inquiry comes through, it's actually stated, and I ask them, where did you find me? Is it through social? Is it through referrals? And one of the other things that's really key is if it has come through a referral, I almost find it a great way to kind of personally thank that person who sent that person that inquiry to me, because it just shows that you've kind of built that trust, you've built that kind of credibility. And if they're coming to you, it only takes a small gesture of a thank you to kind of repay it. And one of the other things I do is if that lead converts, always make sure that I send them some form of a thank you gift or an envelope with some, some vouchers to go and have a nice coffee on me or something like that, because experience is almost part of your lead generation to some extent, because it kind of helps them to realize, like, this person is really kind, they're really nice, they're great to work with, they've got great onboarding process, and then obviously they've booked that person in, or that business has come through, and they're I think that they swim with the people that you're working with. They really ring true to, you're touching those emotional points. And yeah, it's a great way to kind of reinforce referrals, essentially.
This is fantastic. Yeah, I mean, Krishna, you're just so you know, your audio broke in and out a little bit there, but it's just because you have too many good ideas for your Wi-Fi to handle. And it's just getting overloaded with inspiration. So but really great stuff there. I mean, some of the stuff that I'm thinking about from that are thank you notes. I mean, just good old fashioned thank you notes, even a thank you email, or if you're on Instagram or you're in Pinterest, whatever way to thank people. A lot of good client relationships, it seems like, comes down to just courtesy or regular instinctual relationship building. Now, I don't want to assume that all of that comes instinctually, because, for me personally as an introvert, sometimes there are some of those courtesies that I have to learn. One thing that, trying to think about, coming from the perspective of an introvert and coming from the perspective of anybody on the call who's just starting out, I'll start with you, Krishna. What is the one thing that you wish you had known about finding clients when you were first starting out with your business?
Okay, so Sam, that's asking a lot to reflect, just to mention one thing, but genuinely speaking, so I think I've transitioned, if it's even possible, because I was an introvert when I first started in my business. But what I realized is if I don't push my boundaries a little bit, and if I don't kind of step outside my comfort zone, I'm not going to be able to build the business, or I'm not going to be able to find those clients, right? So what I did very early on was I did kind of socializing online. So I was hiding behind my profile picture for a long time because I was working part-time and running my business. So sitting behind my profile picture and building those relationships until it was physically feasible for me to actually go out and meet these people at local networking events. So if it was one thing that I could recommend is probably just pushing yourself that tiny little bit more, just to kind of take yourself outside that comfort zone, because as they say, great things happen when you step outside of it, right? And actually you don't have to just even go from like being a complete introvert and staying behind the screen to running outside and meeting someone locally in your local networking event. You can just join a Zoom call. You can join a local networking thing. You don't even have to have your picture on or like your face showing. You can take it step by step, but those small steps eventually do become bigger steps, and it'll help. It genuinely will help.
So little steps towards growing your comfort zone. It's not going to all happen in one day.
No, it doesn't have to happen in one day either. I think it can happen like one morning you might be like, let me just get on this call. The next morning you'll be like, okay, let me spend 10 minutes trying to find one person that I can speak to who's in the chat. Or it might be just connecting with them on a social media platform that you're on, and then just slowly building those relationships. I think that that's really key.
Definitely. What about you, Elizabeth? Do you think you have a view of how you started and how you slowly grew those relationships over time?
Yeah, was the original question, did you say something about like a mistake or did I mishear?
It doesn't have to be a mistake, although mistakes are always welcome. The original question that I kind of modified was going back to when you first started, what's the one thing that you wish that you'd known about finding clients when you
Right.
were first starting out with your business?
Okay. Yeah. I wanted to like make sure my frame of reference, because as I was thinking, was still kind of in the right space. But one of the big things for me was that when I was starting my business, I had just moved across the country. So I had graduated college from Seattle, got married, and moved to Atlanta, Georgia. And so that was a huge change. And I think my husband was in grad school at the time. So I think there was part of me that was afraid of putting myself out there in person. I think I really kind of clung to more of that digital space because I had this mindset of, well, if I'm going to leave, like, what's the point of putting down roots here anyways and networking anyways, which is totally the wrong opinion to have because surprise, surprise, almost 8 years later, we're still here. So you can never predict the future and you never know what's going to happen. You really got to basically grab the reins in that moment to take control and just to do it. So I wish I had put myself out there more at the beginning because even if we had moved, I still would have been able to keep those connections. I was a wedding stationer, which means I didn't have to be in person on the day of anywhere. So I don't know why my mindset was so caught up in that. Also, I was younger, right? Maybe I was just scared. I was new to the entire thing. So I think just taking a deep breath and maybe having made a physical list of like, here's a checklist of actionable things I can do today would have been really helpful for me because I think I kind of just let everything live up in my brain instead of trying to break down like, hey, what are baby steps, actionable things I can be doing to basically get out there and network and then find clients. And so I started doing it later, maybe 3 years into living here instead of like right away. I wish I had done it differently.
Love a nice checklist. And Krishna, I know you're a fan of lists as well.
I am. I was going to jump in and say, you know what, that is a great idea because it doesn't feel like you've then done something that might feel outside your comfort zone because you're ticking off smaller little things. And it's almost like you've done one small thing that's going to push you towards that bigger goal. And actually, checklists are great. They can help you kind of define your process in the work, not just for finding clients, but actually you can create a process for almost, that inquiry has come in. What do we do with that inquiry? The first thing I would personally do is just send out an autoresponder that automatically responds and obviously says, I've got your email. I'll get back to you within 24 hours. Don't worry. And if you need anything further from me, check out my page or my services. But it's almost like there's no initial rush to kind of go back to them and say, there's come through and I need to quickly do something because that's going to set me off into a tizzy because I haven't understood how to follow it. So that checklist of, the inquiries come in, the autoresponder goes out, give myself a couple of hours, 24 hours if I need it, and then I can respond to them with a bit more of a calmer state of mind and then go back to them again and say, let's get a chat booked in. But it's a checklist. It almost is like that checklist or a process list that because you don't have to worry about what the next step is if you've written it down. So I think that's really useful.
Yeah, and
I'm a big believer in lists myself. I just wanted to show that. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Elizabeth. I know you've got a lot of things about lists too.
No, for sure. No, I was just going to hop back in because obviously so much of this conversation is what you do after someone inquires is incredibly important. And so much of the conversation we're having is like, well, how do you even get people to the inquiry stage, which can feel really scary and confusing and like a huge kind of unknown. So I feel like my checklist when I started to actually be intentional about this, it was things like reach out to 4 local planners, put together a wedding guide. So I purposely have this sitting here next to me because this is my old wedding guide that I had that I could send physical copies of to people, other vendors in the area that might have connections to those clients that I wanted, to get them to actually then come and inquire with me. So I had to break down, like, what are the things I can be doing to get people to basically knock on my door so I can actually answer it, right? So I just wanted to throw that in there. It's something I'm still so proud of to this day, even though I don't use it anymore. I don't do weddings anymore. But I love that I was like able to send that out to people in the area, because I think a physical, in a digital world, a physical copy of something can be really powerful.
I completely agree. One of the things that I've learned about checklists is that it allows you to see very clearly, maybe if you've bit off more than you can chew. So if reaching out to 4 clients this week is like too much for you, then next week you can say, all right, so I made that my checklist. Now I can look back and say 3 this week or 2 this week or something like that. It's always allows you to just have like a record of the things that you intended to do and what you actually did.
Yeah. And a checklist can always be broken up into an even smaller checklist. So I'm a big fan of like breaking it down, because before I even had that reach out to 4 planners, I had to have a checklist item that said research local planners, or I started comprising a spreadsheet of local planners. Like, I had to do this research in these steps to get people into this list first, to find their contact information, to make sure their vibe, meshed with mine before I even reached the step of reach out to them. So I'm a big fan of like breaking things down into infinite finite points, like the smallest little bites that you can. Because then, like you said, Sam, you can kind of break that up into maybe you're doing like 1 of those, 2 of those a day, but over time, the consistency is what's going to come back and pay off in the long run.
Absolutely. Absolutely. We've been talking about finding clients. We've been talking about breaking it down in checklists. If you're like me, my mind is racing with questions for these fantabulous guests we have with us. So in a second, we're going to move over to a Q&A section. I will just point to the Q&A button on the bottom of your Zoom screen. That's the best place to put in a question if you have to ask our guests today. There might be some questions in the chat though, and so McKenna, our production assistant, is going to pay attention to those while we go into Q&A. But also right now, again, I think that it sounds like it would be a great time for us to talk about another awesome circle benefit through the way that we best know how here at Squarespace with an on-air promo. McKenna, would you please share your screen now? And
to do all that much. It was surprising to me how it worked, because it was like we really didn't have to do all that much to get it to work. Specifically with Squarespace, it's nice because basically it already fit my workflow. I was kind of expecting something to go wrong because it seemed too simple, but it just worked. It's not my whole income, but it does help me think about Squarespace first, because that's a pretty good incentive for me. I'm constantly starting new projects. I mean, that's the way to do it, is continually getting new clients and starting new websites.
All right. So yeah, one of the great things about finding new clients in Squarespace, of course, is that means referral payments. So that's just a real example of somebody who has been successful with referral payments, and you can sign up for the referral payment program on your account page at account.squarespace.com. But before we get into the Q&A now, I see there's a couple of questions already in queue. I'd like to make time for our long distance recommendations. So Sarah and I are both people who work side hustles and also work with people who have a lot of side hustles. So this chat is certainly interesting to us personally. Sarah, I'm curious, what's a couple of takeaways that you're going to start with in this conversation?
Yeah, absolutely. I loved this conversation. Thank you, Elisabeth and Krishna, for all of your awesome insights. I think that I'm someone who definitely can put those like big chunks of things to do on her to-do list, which like then I look at it and I'm like, that feels kind of overwhelming. And so I just loved the recommendation that you had, Elizabeth, to not say, oh, I need to reach out to 4 people, but oh, you need to research like who it is that you're going to reach out to. Like, who are even are these people? How are we going to reach out to them? What's their contact information? Then do the reach out. I found that like my personal working style is that I love like a small to medium sized challenge, but a big challenge can make me feel overwhelmed. So the idea of having to go out, research, find the information, I think sets me up for success in the next week, whether, well, I'm not finding clients, but, finding whoever, the next person is that I need to connect with for any one of my ventures. What about you, Sam?
For me, it was similar. I think I need to go easier on myself, but also I think, there's just something comforting to the long-term relationships and just the how a simple gesture like sending a thank you note or a message to somebody just expressing appreciation can really plant the seeds for a long-term client relationship. It really doesn't have to be more than that. But we're not the only ones who have questions right now. Sarah, what kind of questions do we have from our audience?
Yeah, we have a bunch coming in. Let's start with Sophia's question, which says, what source gets you the largest percentage of your clients? And Christian, do you want to start us off?
Sure. Okay, so what source gets you the largest percentage of your clients from? That's a really good question, because I found initially it started off from Instagram, if that's what you mean by source, and they converted into clients. And then the largest source to date has got to be recommendations and referrals. So a lot of my clients refer me, and they actually shout about the work that we've done together. And they spread the news on Instagram and more so LinkedIn now. And because of that, I'm getting more and more inquiries from both those platforms, if that's what you meant.
Yeah, that's great. What about you, Elizabeth? Where are you finding most of your clients? Oh, you're on mute.
A lot of my clients are from my past life in the wedding industry, actually. So even though I left that industry, I continue to work with women from that industry who want to create an online course. So that's how they're finding me. I made a small Squarespace site for myself as well to advertise those services, but I haven't put much into SEO there because I'm very much of the opinion anymore that I would rather have someone referred to me word of mouth, because I think that goes a long way, not only in the quality of client that you're going to receive, but in the long-term relationship and what can be generated from that. So I think what Krishna was talking about earlier, just overall how you treat your clients during the process is so important, because it comes back every time. It will continue to reward you with those referrals in the long term.
Yeah, absolutely. I love that. And I can say, as someone who works with a lot of circle members, word of mouth is really, and referrals are really what like gets folks kind of jump started with their business. So if you can capitalize on those, you're more likely to kind of see more success over the long term. We have another question from Ariel, which says, do you think an old school mailing to local businesses is an effective way to gain new clients? Do you have any experience with that? Elizabeth, I know you used some physical materials. What's your thoughts here?
And I'm still very passionate about paper and send a Christmas card every year and do all of that stuff. And I have to tell you, I get so many compliments on those cards because we write a little story, a little note about what we've done during the year. So I could see that being equally as effective if it's done really well to the people that you're trying to get in contact with. That will require some research on your part, right? You don't want to pay, especially postage keeps going up. So you don't want to pay to mail something, to create something, to do all of that if it's going to people who don't make sense to you. So I think that there's something to be said about doing your research first, maybe contacting those people via email, asking, hey, are you interested in these? We would love to send you a mailer, making the connection that way. So then rather completely out of the blue, they know you a little bit before something shows up in the mail to grab their attention. And that's a great way then for you to follow up. Hey, did you receive XYZ that I sent you in the mail? What do you think about XYZ part of the brochure or the offer that we're creating? So yes, I do think it can be very beneficial. I think people will slowly start to creep that way again with how we have seen algorithms behaving lately and just the sheer amount of information that is online. It's completely digital overload. So I would not rule that out. I would absolutely pursue it. That's me though. I'm a paper person, always in my heart. So I'll always be very pro paper. Yeah.
But to be honest, I actually do agree with you. But I think that from my perspective, because when we send out anything that's paper form, it is almost in the case of a nice surprise, a nice gesture, a Christmas card, something that kind of touches those brand touch points, so to speak. So we've not done any cold outreach, mailing or direct post or anything like that, because I find that for us, the business works better when we've actually built that trust and we've built that credibility. And it's a lot easier for us to convert them from just a lead or a proposal into an actual booked client, because we've worked on that relationship element of it. So again, it might be for us, we'll send out something in the post, like the Christmas card, because I love sending Christmas cards. I think it's a great way to kind of remind them of the great work that we've done in the year, and also because they're already a client anyway. And then just let them know what else is in the plan. So one of the things we did was at Christmas time last year, I sent out an email to all my clients and basically told them that, you know, these are the great projects. We're really thankful for your support this year. We've got lots of great things coming up in the next year. If they ever need any support on any digital design, branding, Squarespace, that we're here for them, and just to kind of outreach and get back to us. But in terms of like actually posting stuff, it's only ever been when it's a touch point, a brand touch point, because I think that works better for us.
Mm-hmm. Awesome. This is, such great wisdom. We had a question from Sadie, which says, what, if any, systems or tools do you use to keep track of potential leads? Elisabeth, you're a paper person. Are you also a systems person?
Yeah, very much so. Especially like systems list all the things. So my client management system of choice is Dubsado. So that's where everything lives centrally and locally for me. I'm even currently organizing this online summit that I'm doing for Ceramicon. I have all of the information for all the artists in Dubsado, even though I'm paying them and they're not paying me. It's still the perfect place to store all the information, like contracts, forms, intake, and all of that. I've used Dubsado for years and years, so highly recommend. That is my personal choice.
Okay, so I've got to say that this is a great question, because I am all for systems and processes in the business, and actually something to keep track of the potential leads. So I use Gmail, I use Google Suite as part of that Gmail, and then I've got Streak for Gmail, which basically I've set that up so that I can actually filter through it the moment an email comes through that's a potential lead, and it will sit there until I've moved it into the next box, and then it's like, has a response gone out to them, and eventually they go through this little funnel until they've booked. So similar to you, Elisabeth, I do use a Dubsado as well, because it's brilliant, because once they've actually signed the contract, or they're actually on board with working together, I move them over to Dubsado, which is where we send out the contract, we send out the invoices, we send out any proposals, so everything lives within there. Once it's kind of signed and they're officially a client, we onboard them, and we use Asana, that's a project management tool. So then they kind of sit into there. And then we've got another process of, depending on what kind of project it is, they go through that checklist. So that checklist will go through, the project information they might need to know. It will have the details and all the tasks for a branding project. Once they finish that, they've got the website project, and then it's almost like at the end, we don't actually call it like goodbye and we don't leave them. We kind of focus on trying to nurture them to make sure that this is just, we're offboarding you, but that has another process as well. And And yeah, you can see I kind of get excited when it's like these checklists, processes, and systems, because another thing I've learned in my business is clients don't like projects to kind of drag. They don't like the idea of it. And actually, as a business owner, as a designer and developer, you're not going to want that project to drag for like months and months and months, because I find that you'll lose interest in wanting to do that project. They'll lose interest, and the relationship then turns a little bit not so great, shall we say. So before it gets to that, if we can kind of nurture it and keep it processed, keep it kind of on a timeline, keep it smooth, and keep that communication and that transparency like open and clear throughout, it will really help that project get from start to finish. And the process helps. So a lot of my clients, what they have said in like the Google reviews that we've got is the fact that our process is so tight that it helps them to kind of keep on track. So but that's not to say you can't introduce a tiny bit of flexibility in, because let's be honest, life does get in the way. And things like, you know, when COVID hit, for example, adjusting that process to what's going on for you, for your clients, for the business, the environment, it does help. So you just got to have a little bit of flex in that system and that process to make sure it can move with you when your business changes or develops and grows. Sorry, that was a bit of a long answer, but I hope that was helpful.
No, absolutely. It's so great to know like that it is possible to set up a process for everything. And that's awesome. Okay. In one sentence, because we have like a minute. Okay.
I want to say Megan had a question about the terms and conditions, and word of mouth, go to the contractshop.com, look up theirs. They have GDPR stuff. So that's that question.
Thank you. One last question in one sentence so that we can wrap up. Is there any merit to approaching a company whose website is out of date or just not doing the best job for their business? Do you guys ever do that in a sentence or two?
Yes, absolutely. Sorry. Yeah, absolutely. So a couple of business projects we've won has been purely from the fact that I've noticed that they're on Squarespace, and I've already got a relationship built with them. So I've kind of spoken to them in the past. So it's not completely blank, but I have sent them an email, dropped them a message on telephone or arranged a Zoom call and said, look, these 5 things will easily help you to improve your website, whether it's kind of, making sure that the little black box that we have in the favicon, making sure that they've put their brand favicon up there, making sure it's kind of, they've done something on the homepage that really elevates who they speak to, but giving them like 3 to 5 tips. That's always worked in my favor, because obviously you're giving them free value, free advice, and it helps. So awesome. It's a bit of a long sentence, but yes.
No, I love it. All right, Elizabeth, take us home.
I haven't done that because I literally do 2 clients a year, maybe at the most, because the scale of our projects is just so huge. But I think it's a great idea. So go for it.
Amazing. All right, Sam, back to you.
So
it's back to me, actually.
Yeah, I mean, go for it, Sarah.
All right. If people want to contact you or follow you or get more information about your agency and work, how can they best find you? Twitter, Facebook, Be Real, MySpace, Tumblr?
Oh, are you asking us our socials?
Yes.
I got very distracted reading all the comments from everybody. Okay. I'm at elisaann.co. That's my personal one. But I'm at ceramicon.co for the current project that I'm working on. But yeah, most of the things are going to show up for me as Eliza Ann instead of Elisabeth, because that's what my business name was for a really long time. So that's the best place to find me.
Perfect. And what about you, Krishna? Where can we find you?
On socials, you'll probably find me on Instagram. Pretty straightforward, Krishna Solanki or Krishna Solanki Designs. The same thing on LinkedIn. They're probably the best 2 platforms if it's social. Otherwise, yeah, my website, KrishnaSolankiDesigns.com. It's quite long, but there hopefully is only 1 or 2 Krishna Solankis, and I'm the top, hopefully.
Perfect.
Spectacular. Well, I'll also note that this episode ties into a recent blog post by our colleague and friend David Alex about client consultations and how that can help you in your client search. McKenna, could you please share the link to that article in the chat? if you were able to sign up for the post-show breakout room, you can now follow that link in the invitation. If not, please stay in the Zoom, and our production assistant, McKenna, can help you out in the live chat if you want to join, or you can just leave. This is the end. I want to make sure that we thank our fantastic guests today, Krishna and Elisabeth. Thank you so much for joining us today. This was an amazing conversation. And learned so much. I know there's a lot of people really excited about stuff in the chat, and I'm still going to continue to learn. We'll send out a recording of this so you can watch this again to your heart's delight. And until next Circle Live, I am Sam Z.
And I'm Sarah G.
Reminding you that there are no late fees in the asset library.
So good. All right. Bye, everybody. See you in the
See you in the
breakout.
post-over chat. Bye.
Bye.